So welcome folks, for those who've just joined us. I can see Julie and Patty, and I think I saw Jean earlier. So yeah, welcome to this impromptu live, which wasn't something that I'd planned to do, but had an insight to do this tonight. So welcome if you're watching live or if you're watching on replay. Give us a like or a heart and tell us you're here. But yeah, it's got called, or entitled should I say, This Earthquake, a Shift in Consciousness. This Earthquake, a Shift in Consciousness. So yeah, with that title, This Earthquake, a Shift in Consciousness in mind, I just want to sort of share over the next however long it takes. I'm not sure how long it'll be now. Just a series of insights on things that emerged over the period of lockdown to present day, and kind of give us some pointings to the realization of the self, but also all that's unfolding here now on the planet and what it's kind of inviting us to look towards. So it sort of all fits together with the general message I share with the world. But the insights were sort of unexpected messages and come in a variety of different ways. And I just wanted to talk about those, share them with you, and we see where we go. I can see a few more people have joined us, Lee and Berta and Catherine as well. So welcome to you all. Just going to make sure everything's working on the comment side, just to make sure, yeah, that's okay, good. So yeah, let's kick off then. When you're open to the highest truth of who you really are, and there's like a receptiveness inside of you, then insight, information, whatever it is that serves the highest good in you will tend to emerge and naturally flow from you. And some of those things can be quite surprising at times, and the way in which it emerges can also be interesting. It has a different feel and energy to it to a simple thought. It tends to be much more uplifting, inspirational, and point to a wider, shall we say, meaning and wider application than just mere personal matters. Although there can be insights for you specifically, personally. What I found over the years is that sometimes that can come in unusual language, as if to distinguish it from shall we say, the normal process of thought. And all these insights I'm going to share with you actually came in a meditative space over a series of dates. And some of them, the timing of them was actually quite interesting, really. I only just realized that today as I was just going through my notes and the various posts I'd done about some of them, but not all of them, on Facebook. And I was quite intrigued to sort of see, and in fact I'd forgotten one or two of them as well. So I'll share that, and I'll also share the sequence with you as well, as we kind of go through it. So I can see Amy's joined us as well, and Earl. So I'm speaking from the UK, I live in North Yorkshire, England, which is about 230 miles north of London, for those who don't live in the UK. And I'm sort of starting with the context that actually it was on the 23rd of March here in the UK that our Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced lockdown. And that was basically taking immediate effect. And I remember sat down watching that with Sue. And interestingly, it was literally overnight. So that was, I think, about 8 o'clock at night or something or other that was done. The first of these insights came, which was very, very interesting, in a meditative space. The message or the insight that came to me was actually resonant with a song you might have heard of, and I can't remember when the song was live now, but it came as this: "This is planet Earth. Can you hear me now? This is planet Earth. Can you hear me now?" And with that, I felt called to sort of jot that down as it came, and some further words came, which I'll also share, and then I'll go on to a bit of insight around all that for you. And I'm just going to read it here just to make sure I get it right. "As the world falls more and more silent, do you hear the call for you to do the same? The call of the silent awareness, the call of the wild." So it was pretty clear to me as that happened and as lockdown happened and it became a reality, certainly here in the UK and in more or less similar times, maybe a few days before, a week or two before, or a week or two after in other parts of the world, that actually, whether we liked it or not, the world was being put into varying stages of lockdown, and for the time being at least, movement was being restricted, and lots of other consequences of that were inevitable. And it was very, very noticeable straight away just actually how much more silent the world was. For me, it was a very, very palpable sensation as I walked out and noticed that suddenly the world had gone quiet. And it was very, very apparent to me that actually, not only because of COVID-19 and the sort of safety issues and health issues associated with that, but herein was a deep invitation and an opportunity, irrespective of the sort of various consequences, and I know that some of those have been quite significant for people, to start to look inside to a deeper calling, a deeper awareness. And with the world itself being quieter and less distraction from the outside world in terms of being able to move about and have the kind of freedoms that we've been so used to, actually you were more or less being invited to stay in one place and only with the members of that household. And it was going to immediately, force is maybe a strong word, but invite you to just look at life and look inside, because ultimately the realization of who you really are is only going to come in silence. Only going to come in silence. And silence is much greater than you might imagine. It's not just simply the absence of sound. When I use the term silence, and in particular infinite silence, what I'm referring to is energy that is aware of itself, this self-aware energy. And that's why I say in the meditations, in silence you will realize your truth, and in truth you will realize you are silence. And that silence is a non-personal, self-aware energy. So this first message that's saying, "This is planet Earth, can you hear me now?" Now that's, you might just think of the Earth itself as an inert object, but it's not. It's part of consciousness. The Earth is a conscious manifestation. Even a rock has consciousness, and the Earth is a living consciousness, a living being, of which we are both one with and part of in a unified way. And so another part of this message was that actually the earth itself, as a living being, a living creature, was crying out to us, so to speak, from within to say, look, listen, where if we carry on the same track, on the same path of this busyness, of this constant striving, reaching, stretching, without really considering the earthly wide, the environmental consequences of what we're doing, we're on a path of destruction. So a big part of this first message is about using this opportunity, this stillness that was created by the lack of movement, the lack of freedom of movement and so forth, to look within and start to reevaluate what was truly important inside. And hence, this is planet Earth. Can you hear me now? Hi Tina, who's just joined us as well. And then the second part, as the world falls more and more silent, do you hear the call for you to do the same? The call of the silent awareness, the call of the wild. It can't get much clearer about an invitation there. And it was also clear as part of that the earth itself, what came to me with that was kind of having a breather, so to speak. And people had asked me questions throughout this period, what do I feel that was going on? And I'll explain more about that later. But we're so used to living as things separate from us when we're one with all of it, the trees, the plants, the animals, the earth, the solar system, the galaxy. Everything is unified in this oneness. And so people talk about, well, where did this virus, where did this come from? How did this emerge? And we tend to think of consciousness as something personal, but actually there's collective elements to our consciousness, and we're creating and co-creating our experience all the time. So at the one level, we have actually created this experience of this lockdown, the experience of this virus, in a way to sort of stop us, so to speak, in our tracks and look and invite us to sort of look more deeply and see what's going on. And one of the early streams I did shortly after lockdown, it was immediately apparent to me that this was going to cause quite a lot of distress for people. And the major reason for that, with it being a virus, is that it immediately brings to the fore in people's consciousness man's or humanity's biggest fear. And that, my friends, is the fear of death. Whether you're consciously aware of that or not, that fear is within all beings until the nature of the true self is realized, and the realization that actually, in ultimate consciousness terms or absolute self-realization terms is concerned, there is no death. And so here we are, we're being presented with a virus that at some level in your consciousness it's going to go, oh my gosh, it could kill me. And that immediately is going to trigger in people all sorts of fears. And I've seen a lot of this over the last few months, all of these fears, and some of the things that we're seeing going on even right now are different manifestations of that fear coming to the surface. and all of the trauma that humanity's carried inside in many, many different ways that we're seeing across the news at the moment, whether it be Black Lives Matter or all sorts of other demonstrations about freedom or all sorts of other things that have been visited upon people. All of those are subsumed within this fear that I'm talking about, and the greatest fear is the fear of death. And here humanity is being faced head on with its greatest fear. And so it was fairly obvious that this was going to cause a lot of distress for a lot of people, and it has done. But interestingly, I would also share with you that whilst that is now right on the surface and very visible to more of us than it had been previously prior to lockdown, the fact is the whole of humanity was and is suffering. It's just now more evident. It's brought it all to the surface. And this is also then another part of the invitation to look within and to dissolve this fear of death. Because as the realization of the self, the true non-personal awareness or infinite silence flowers, what is seen and realized is that whilst you may think that you are the body-mind, actually you are the infinite silence or the infinite awareness or life eternal. That's non-personal, and that's not just some of us, that's all of us. We are that, and yet we're made manifest in these unique forms that we call Philip and Tina and Amy and Earl as a unique expression of that. So the deepest impact of this is that it brings this fear, this big issue around life and death, right head on into humanity's consciousness. And here it is. And if that's not an invitation to go within and look deeply and listen, which is the core of the start of the message, then I don't know what is. This is planet Earth, and we are one with the Earth. Can you hear me now? And this me isn't just referring to the Earth itself. It's referring to the true nature of the self, the non-personal awareness as infinite silence. And that, as I say, that first part came immediately, as far as the UK was concerned, the day after lockdown had occurred. So I hadn't really realised that that was the case until I wrote that down in the notes I was preparing for tonight in terms of the sequence of the messages. Interestingly, the second, I've identified a number, but it was like a constant process really. But the second key message, hi Richard, thanks for joining us, that came was equally surprising in a way. And the detail of it, I didn't quite sort of grasp what it was, and I kind of dismissed it a little bit at the time because I wasn't really sure what it was pointing to. And then, blow me down, it actually became apparent what it was pointing to. And it was actually a message in connection with our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. And essentially, without going into the detail of the message, which was worded a bit strangely and would take a little bit for me to interpret it for you, it indicated that actually it was a little bit of a horror movie and that actually something significant was going to unfold in connection with Boris Johnson. And I forgot about that, and then we heard, I forget what date, that's right, he went into hospital on the 5th of April, and this message emerged before that he'd gone into hospital and it was actually had been infected by COVID-19, and as I'm sure many of you know, actually got into quite a serious state, was on ICU and so forth. And that it was at that point my wife reminded me, said, "Didn't you get some insight about that?" And I remembered. Now you might wonder how such an insight arises, and because you might call this thing like a premonition and so forth. But actually, all of the information in the collective consciousness is here now. But in the limited form of our bodies, which are still beautiful gifts, we only see a small part of the picture. But as we step back into awareness, it's like a bit like a radio station you can tune into, become aware of whatever information is pertinent to you in this form now. Excuse me, I just need a little drink. And whilst I hadn't asked for that information about Boris, it came and was pointing to that. So when I was reminded of it and I looked back and I thought, oh, that's what it was. That's what it was pointing to. And actually I felt it was greater significance than him personally about the seriousness with which we needed to take this invitation to look within, because he's not the only, shall we say, well-known figure that has been touched by this. So if it's going to infect the Prime Minister of the UK, for instance, then we could all be touched by it. So I've included that one deliberately as part of the insights that received. So it was another reinforcement. Shortly after that, a week after Boris going into hospital, the next meditative insight that I want to share with you was this. I suddenly heard in meditation the words, "It's hard. It is hard. It's hard." And the question automatically, without a conscious thought, arose asking, well, for whom? For whom? And what came in the meditation? What came in the meditation was the trees. It was meaning it's hard for the trees. And in that same experience, it was like the consciousness that what we are, I am, became one with the earth network of trees, and the vision, if you like, or the experience that was seen. And I'm going to show you a little slide here now, if I can find it. Just going to drag that down. Yeah. Hopefully you can still hear me. Okay, it sounds like your Wi-Fi is struggling a bit there, Tina. Hopefully everybody else can hear me okay. I'm hoping that you can see and hear on here this image of a couple of trees and the root network connecting between the trees. And actually this came to me earlier today, this image. I saw it posted on a group and it reminded me of the vision of this message around the trees, because what was shown at that time was this network, and I've seen this before scientifically. I understand this is being researched now, that actually the trees and the plants and the network are actually all in communication with one another, not just through the root systems. Actually, the mushrooms, and I think it's called, I'm not sure if it's called the mycelium network or what, something like that. There's a constant process of communication. There's a constant process of communication going on between the tree network. And what I saw as part of this meditation insight was that okay, so sound dropped out when you mentioned the sentence. Can you repeat the sentence? Okay, the sentence was, the message was, it's hard. It is hard. And then there was a question that arose in consciousness, for whom? And the response was, for the trees. And then was shown this network of tree communication going on. Actually, I was part, or one was, we are part of this network. And it was made clear that this communication network was going on. And part of what was happening, is that with this lockdown happening globally, Gaia, the earth, whatever you want to call it, was given an opportunity to breathe. And I don't know if you noticed it, but certainly it felt to me like the air was clearer and there was a lot more stillness and a lot more silence. It was very, very palpable. And as part of this same insight, what came to me as another sentence insight was that part of what needs to happen is, and it was these words, thousands of square miles to be planted. Thousands of square miles to be planted. That's trees I'm talking about there. Thousands of square miles of trees. And I was reminded of an organization that somebody had mentioned to me earlier this year, and it's called Tree Sisters Global, I think it's called. And I felt compelled to find their website. And Sue and I, my wife and I, are actually already members of the National Trust here in the UK, the Woodland Trust, which plants trees, and decided to make a donation to that organisation, which is working with many other organisations planting trees around the world. So it felt like a compelling thing for me to do that day, to actually make a donation to that. And I actually shared the message on Facebook. This particular one I actually shared on Facebook to reach a growing awareness of the importance of us looking after the environment and looking after our tree network. So, and this whole connection, this whole network was shown, and as the consciousness, the silence was merged with it, what was sensed or seen was a, if you want to call it a healing or a reconnection, starting to emerge and starting to take place. And it actually fits with some of the later insights that also equally unexpectedly came. So that was the next phase. But again, I must stress that it's not just about doing things outside, because as we become more connected, more aware of what's going inside, we start to have greater compassion, start a broader picture than just what's going on with us, and we start to become more compassionate, not only to other people but to the planet that we live on. So it's a very, very relevant insight and message. So that was the third part. Sounds like you're struggling a little bit there, Tina, with your Wi-Fi and stuff. Hopefully you can hear it, but it will be available on replay. So fingers crossed you'll be able to watch that. So trust everybody's okay and following where I'm going with this now as I move on to the next phase of the the insights. So having been made clear that this was part of the process and that this was much more than just about a virus that was circling around humanity, that there's a collective shift going on here, both in terms of human awareness, but also in the planetary opportunity for itself to have a breather, so to speak. What came next, well, on the 11th of May, was quite a surprising insight, which I also shared on Facebook at the time. And on this occasion, you can call this an out-of-body experience or whatever you want to call it. But essentially the consciousness beyond the body shot up into space, and it was like entered some kind of through a shaped opening. This was a metaphor now, and looking down onto the earth, what was seen, and I'm going to show you an image here. Good, okay. So again, hopefully you can see these. So if you can imagine looking down on the earth from space, and I've shown you two images here, both of which are quite similar. But if you can imagine the earth in the center of the toroid or donut there, the whole of the planet, and then this image in 3 dimensions. So the earth in the right hand one, it would be in the center of that white section. What was shown was a very fine energy grid, not the colors here, but it was shown as a kind of goldy white with the earth around, this energy grid circling around the earth, almost like a wedding ring. And it was probably, if you imagine that from the North Pole to the South Pole, it would be covering about 2/3 of the planet, as the insight was shown, this energy grid, crisscrossing in what is called a toroidal field. And the left-hand image is just actually an image that my friend Jolene gave me of a piece of jewellery that's been made to look like that. And this image, by the way, on the right, was one of the images that was developed for my website back in 2014, when that was coming into being. And I hadn't been able to find on the internet any images that looked like the one I'd seen in the vision of the earth. And then I remembered this one. And what this is, if you've ever looked into sacred geometry, there are energy grids around the earth. They go by various names. They can sometimes be referred to as the diamond light grid, the Christ consciousness grid, and so forth. This was part of that. And what came, the awareness that came with this vision, was that this energy field was in place around the earth, and it was like a marriage or a wedding or a communion with the earth, that we're being invited to be, if you like, metaphorically speaking, married to and love the earth as if it is our partner in this life as humans, and that this energy grid was forming and being strengthened as the consciousness of humans evolved and they become more connected to themselves. And interestingly, to reinforce that message, one of the visions that I had as the consciousness moved above the planet and looked down was actually the Norse god Sif. The Norse god Sif, S-I-F, that's how you spell it. who is actually connected in Norse mythology with the earth, and is also connected with fertility and that kind of sense of unity or marriage. So again, this was a further reinforcement that much more was going on around the planet other than just humanity's concern for itself and a virus, and that actually we're in creation and co-creation with what's unfolding here. And this energy grid, actually, as more people started to become more connected and more open to what's unfolding inside, this will actually strengthen, this will actually strengthen the energy grid around the earth, because everything ultimately is energy, and consciousness is self-aware energy, and the true self is non-personal self-aware energy or infinite silence. So that was a surprising but useful clarification that emerged next. So that was in, when did I say that one was? 11th of May. So I'm going to leave those images up there. What came next? Interestingly, I was in a conversation with a friend, and she said, oh, there's something else. Excuse me. Throat's going to be dry. That's emerging. And I went outside to our summer house and was connecting. She actually sort of said, you need to be near the poppies. And I think it was the poppies because they're representative of poppies grow in disturbed soil or earth that's been moved. They grow best there. And meditating upon this on the 31st of May now, the next set of messages came was that now there was a sort of a clearer seeing that we needed to burn in the fire of truth all that no longer serves us, to dissolve that. This was a big part of the invitation that's manifesting and unfolding here. And the message was to move deeper into this clearer inner seeing of the awareness, and that this is coming from a higher awareness, or the highest authority was the term, or the highest sovereignty that's within us all as this non-personal awareness. And then, as part of that, a clarification of that emerged in the same meditation, and it was in some interesting language, which often happens as insights come, I found in me over the years, and I'll read it to you exactly what came. And it was this: COVID-19 arrived, and I'll clarify it as after I've said it. COVID-19 arrived for sky repairmongering. Now that may seem a strange sentence, but let me unpack that for you, because the meaning of that came with the words that came. So COVID-19 is obviously the coronavirus, and what the message was pointing to, and you, by the way, you don't have to believe a single word I'm saying about any of this. This is all being offered to see what resonates for you and what doesn't, as the case may be. So it's entirely up to you what you make of this. The virus arrived for sky. Now this reference to sky was actually a reference to what in the Native American or the First Peoples traditions, that it's often referred to as Father Sky. It's a reference to the higher awareness, the collective consciousness. the virus had arrived or emerged as part of the collective consciousness. And the bit about repair mongering is to allow repair to take place, not only in humans, but also within the planet itself. It's a strange way, but mongering is a is a term that we use in English. We can, and this was about repair mongering, to construct or to create or to evolve or to allow repair to happen. Now, you might reasonably ask at this point, well, obviously a lot of people have died and passed on as a result of this. Is this part of that too? And yes, at the human level, of course, people have, and the number is quite a significant number now. But we must also remember, whilst that's sad that that has to happen at the human level, life itself is eternal. And I shared on a live stream recently about a near-death experience. In fact, an actual death experience that somebody had had on an operating table in an operating theatre, been declared dead for 20 minutes, not just a few minutes, but 20 minutes or more. And this person came back to life. Takes 3 minutes, 4 minutes for brain death, by the way. And this person was able to report everything that had been going on in the operating room, even though officially and actually speaking their body was dead. What that shows you, and I've got the link to that experience reported by an eminent heart surgeon in the US, shows us is that the first awareness that once a person passes over into spirit is that they are not their body and actually they're still here. So whilst it's true many people have left their bodies, what they've all seen without fail is that life is eternal. And one of the interesting, very important parts about when people pass over, especially when people are aware of that, it always is communicating a message for anybody who is aware of those. And in this case, it's the whole of humanity. And that goes right back to the first message. This is planet Earth. Can you hear me now? So I'm sharing that because this is very much part of, what is it? I often wondered prior to the arrival of this, what it was going to take for humanity to stop, to look, and to listen. And if there's one thing that COVID-19 has done, is forced us to stop. How many of us have looked and listened remains to be seen. But it certainly allowed us to do it. And a lot of people I've seen have started to look more deeply, started to meditate more, started to look inside. And things have come up for them and started to be processed, which no other situation perhaps would have created in quite the same way. I'm just looking at Earl's comment here and about Anita Morjani. And for those of you who don't know, it's a story well worth looking at. Anita Morjani, I can't remember the full story now, but in essence, she, I think, if I remember rightly, was riddled with cancer and was on death's door, pretty much died in the typical near-death experience, and as part of that process, let's say an opportunity arose for a deeper seeing. I'm just trying to summarize the bits I can remember of the story. But long story short, just like the person I'd be describing in the operating theatre came back to life, and her cancers, as I remember rightly, completely and utterly disappeared. And that was Anita Morjani's experience. I mean, didn't just go, but they completely went. And another indication that we are more than bodies. So thanks for raising that, Earl. That's a useful comment at this point. And Amanda's adding here, I'm just going to read her comment. Had an insight that Boris was supposed to be resuscitated, but jumped the quantum. We have to suffer more to see collective consciousness through past wrongdoing. I think I'm following what you're saying. So basically, it sounds like you had an insight about that same thing. And this suffering, I'm guessing what you're saying, if I'm understanding what you're pointing at there. You see, the Buddha, and maybe you can add to that if need be, Amanda, the Buddha talked about this life is suffering. And what he meant by that is that if we are focused on and believe that the body mind is all that we are, and because that's impermanent and things in life are always changing, we will always suffer. And it's not that that's being visited upon us by some external force. It's actually a tool to invite us to look deeply into the realization of who we are. And it's that way that we bring an end to suffering. And were it not for that vehicle of that, then we would very easily forget. So actually the purpose of suffering is to bring you to realization. It's not something that's being forced upon us by some external force. It's something that we create from ourselves by separating or having or believing in the idea of separation of the truth of which we really are. And sometimes for us to wake up, that suffering has to reach very high levels. However, if we're prepared to listen and look within, then we can move beyond that suffering, and it doesn't have to be that difficult. It is only when we're not listening that the suffering gets exacerbated. So I'm interpreting a little bit of what Amanda's saying there and putting it in the context of spiritual self-realization. So this, again, by bringing to the fore humanity's greatest fear, the fear of death, is inviting us to look at all the trauma that we're carrying inside and to move beyond it and to dissolve it and to realize our eternal nature, our unity, our nature, our complete union with not only each other but with the entire universe. And that the portal of that is looking through and dissolving suffering. Carrying on with the insights, and this particular one that came on the 31st of May about the repair-mongering part. The final part came as this insight, and it's a confirmation, again, to do with self-realization. And the words were, "There is nothing I am not. there is nothing I am not. And whilst this virus appears to be harmful at the human level, it also is life. It also is a manifestation of consciousness. And everything that's being experienced on the planet is a reflection of both individual and collective consciousness. We might like to think that these things are being visited upon us, but actually we're creating and co-creating our complete experience. And so this COVID-19 virus is very much part and manifestation of the infinite silence that has been created and co-created by the collective consciousness of the planet. And that message, there is nothing I am not, is another pointing, another way of looking at that. It's like we're inviting ourselves to look deeper and step beyond. I trust all that's making sense to you thus far. So we can sort of see a sequence of things that are unfolding here now. And as if to reinforce that last insight, there is nothing I am not, and that this is all being created and co-created in the field of consciousness, I had another strangely worded insight that came in meditation, and it went like this. Wuhan, and that's the place in China that the virus is reported to have been first made manifest. Wuhan Indra Singh. Wuhan Indra Singh. Indra is an Indian name or word, and Singh is also an Indian name. And I wondered what this one meant to until I looked up the Sanskrit meaning of the name Indra, and it turns out that it's equivalent to, or a metaphor in this insight, for the god of rain or possessing drops of rain. And Singh is the Sanskrit for an eminent being or person. And the understanding that came with this message was that actually, again, reinforcing this insight that there is nothing that I am not, that this had been created and co-created in the collective consciousness to go back right to the very first message. This is planet Earth. Can you hear me now? For if this hadn't been made manifest, we would likely continue on the path that we were on, and we wouldn't be listening, and something has to happen, something big has to transpire in the field of consciousness to make us to stop, to look, and to listen. So strangely worded, but that's what the insight was leading to. And as part of that same message, there was another insight that what's unfolding here now on the earth is part of a shift in consciousness that's taking place across the planet over many years. And if you, and I'm not schooled in any of this, but there are things in Hindu tradition that's talked about a lot. There are various phases in the collective cycle of consciousness, and they're referred to as yugas, Y-U-G-A. You can look that up if you want. But the insight that came, but the totality of this shift that's taking place, the totality of the shift that's taking place. The insight indicated that it was in the region of 600 years, and that we're in a transitional phase right now, and that this experience that's unfolding here right now is very much part of that process. So that was that part. So whilst we may not be here in these bodies in 600 years' time, the thing is, life is eternal, and we're all part of this creating and co-creating this shift that, should we say, is unfolding right here, right now. What's Amanda saying here now? Yes. Yes, there will be world. This is about the Buddha. Yes, there will be world awakening and the suffering. Buddha is misquoted in the life is suffering. Correct translation is there is suffering in life. That may be so, Amanda. I'm not schooled in Buddhism or the Eightfold Path or the Four Noble Truths and so forth. Irrespective of the translation, the fact is, and that until the self is utterly and completely realized, people will experience suffering. And until that's there, so until that has been completely and utterly realized, and by the way, the emotional body completely dissolved, then there's always going to be suffering. And this is why it's important for us, for the collective shift in consciousness to take place, for us all to take personal responsibility for the arising and the awareness of the realization of the self. Suffering isn't visited upon us externally, it is created by the belief in the case of mistaken identity, that all that we are is the body-mind, when we are the absolute awareness or the infinite silence or the infinite consciousness itself. The instant one steps away from that and believes one is, and all that one is the body-mind, there is suffering. There is suffering. And actually, in the realization that unfolded in me back in 2014 now, one of the insights that came when mind, so to speak, was trying to understand what was going on was this: life is death. Life is death. And you might wonder what that means is, and what it meant was, as the death of the identity, as the small self, as the egoic self, as the idea of one being and believing one being the body-mind, and that's all that you are, as that dies, what remains is life, as awareness, as consciousness. Life is death. And you could also say equally, death is life. And actually, in truth, although it appears that in our experience that there's this kind of constant experience of us as bodies, actually we're being recreated in each moment of now at a speed so fast you cannot perceive. You know, like in the old days when, before movies came in, you had these flicker cards, and each one had a little bit of image on it, and the image was one tiny movement on from the previous one, and then there may be 100 of these, and if you flick through the book fast enough, it looked like it was moving. Imagine that happening at an incredible rate, then that gives you a more accurate picture of what's actually happening. Each moment of now is like that flicker screen happening at an incredible speed, and everything is being created and recreated and co-created in that same way, and all of it is here now. What I'm describing there is a metaphor for the manifestation of life. So just bringing that bit to a close, in terms of that June, that insight was on the 4th of June. All of this was about the transition that's taking place in the collective shift in consciousness now. And that is ongoing and will be ongoing for a very long time. The final message I'm going to share with you now was both something for individual, but also collectively, and that was the air is clear now. That was another meditative insight. The air is clear now. And what that means is that what that was pointing to, there was a clarity, there's a shift that's been taking place, but it needs to continue to take place. We need to keep on listening, we need to keep on stopping, we need to keep on looking inside. But a transitional phase has been, should we say, passed through, and we need to continue and return not to normal. This isn't about getting back to normal, it's about coming back to natural. And by natural, I mean the realized self. So that's it. Oh, that's a lot of talking, a lot of information, a lot of insights that I've shared there. And I'm just going to leave you with that image, and then I'll move to a meditation, the infinite silence meditation. So if anybody wants to add anything or share anything before we go to the meditation, then you can do. There's quite a lot there, I realise, and it's the first time I've put it all together in one complete piece, but I had an insight that there was a call from within to do that today. So I trust that you've found that useful. As I say, you don't need to believe a single word I say. Take what resonates for you in your heart and go with that. Truth is an experience, not a belief. Truth is an experience. In fact, I would say truth is a realization, not a belief. And as the true nature of the self is realized, then you will see and then you will know. So for me, everything and all these insights I've shared with you have all been pointing to that invitation that's coming from within to realize our true nature. And this image, this final image I've put on here, it's just a metaphor for us being in harmony and in union with not only the earth, the being hugging the earth there and being one with the earth, but actually we've got the whole cosmos in the background, and you can see the being is actually also the cosmos, and the earth itself, of which our physical bodies are made of the elements of the earth and the cosmos, are all in union and communion with each other. So I feel it's a rather beautiful image. So if you like, I was going to finish this with a meditation now, maybe just 10 or 15 minutes meditation. just to allow us all to integrate that. So if you're up for that, let's just get yourself comfortable, whether you're gonna sit down or lie down, and we'll go for a meditation. But before I do that, I'm just going to put some harp music on just for a minute, because I need to top up my water. So just enjoy the harp for a minute and I'll be with you shortly. Good, so thank you for bearing with me on that whilst I just topped up my glass of water. So if you want to sit down or lie down, I'll come back on screen now and just gently closing your eyes and becoming aware of your body. Just noticing the feelings, sensations, any emotions, your breath, just bringing your attention to all these phenomena. And just being open from your heart to the experience of spheres of light. Spheres of light. This is the same as the universal state. I am pure being. Just allowing your attention to rest on this I amness, this aliveness. Just noticing this state. I am. And as your attention notices this state, I am, know that this is only possible from the silent witness within infinite silence. This silent witness that witnesses or sees the state I am, or spheres of light, merging, becoming one with this silent witness. And this silent witness is like some ice in an ocean of water, and it's dissolving, melting, becoming one with the water. Simply, silently, effortlessly dissolving. Merging, becoming one with the water. And just for now, knowing this water is like an ocean of infinite silence, just like you've dived into the ocean and all has become still and silent. There may be waves on the surface, but all is becoming stiller, more and more silent. And just for now, being open in silence, we trust. Just for now, being open to this. In silence, you will realize your truth. In truth, you will realize you are silence, infinite silence, or infinite awareness, absolute consciousness, eternal. And from this infinite essence, the perfumes of peace, joy, love, truth, grace flow effortlessly from the silence of your heart into every cell of your being. Deeper and deeper you merge, become one with this stillness, this infinite silence. This rarefied atmosphere of silence. Here, now, and eternally, this perfect presence in the inner infinite dimensions. Life eternal. Here you are in silence, as silence. Being open to this realization. Here, now. This stillness, this silence, eternally communicating its message unto itself, to realize itself as this, as life eternal. This is the opportunity, and this is the invitation from within. Always here, always now. this infinite power within. And in a moment, I'll ring the singing bowl 3 times, just keeping your eyes closed for now. And as the sound of the singing bowl has faded away, just aware of your body, the chair you're sat on, or whatever you may be lay on, and gently, whenever the moment is right for you, opening your eyes. And if you need to, have a good stretch. Come to. And if there's anything anybody wants to ask or share about the stream tonight, the meditation, or anything to do with spiritual self-realization, just let me know, and I'll put the harp on for a few moments, just to allow everybody to come to, just to see if there's anything anybody wants to share. And if do let me know what your reflections are. Thank you. Good, so I can see a few thank you messages from a few people there. That's Richard and Earl and Berta. Thank you everybody for listening. I realised that was quite a lot of information I was imparting there, and Catherine as well. Thank you for participating. As I say, it's really important in any aspect of realising the self to just be open to your highest truth. It's not about believing anything I may say or anybody else for that matter. about what's resonating with the highest truth in your heart. And that's why it's important to understand that truth is a realization, not a belief. So go with that. Be open to the highest calling of your heart. And if you go with that and trust that inner wisdom, then you will see, then you will open to what's already here now, which is the realization that you are in fact life eternal. And if there's one thing to take away from this whole thing with COVID-19, is the massive invitation it represents to stop, to look, and to listen inside. Because inside is not a direction, but it's an inner infinite dimension. And if you really want to find peace or realize peace, which is more accurate, then going within to these inner infinite dimensions is the way and the only way. And again, it's not necessary to believe anybody on that. You will see. You will see. And that everything that we're creating and co-creating and experiencing is a reflection of both the individual and collective consciousness. But we can be at peace. The end of suffering is the full dissolution of the emotional body and the realization of that which you really are. You're still going to have a body, you're still going to have the practicalities of life, like that old Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. In the first case, you may be lost deeply in the story and the suffering in life. In the second, with the knowing and the realization of this eternal nature of who you truly are, the dissolution of the emotional body, which will already be quite significant by the time this realization has flowered, will deepen and continue. And now it can be watched from a deeper place. And there will be a peace, an everlasting presence that's felt within, even though you still have a body and there are still practicalities. You can live a more peaceful and more graceful existence. And somebody asked on a recent live stream, what can I do to help humanity? And the answer ultimately is realize that which you truly are, which is the infinite silence or infinite awareness or infinite consciousness, whatever name you want to give it. Names are meaningless to it. The realization of that is unequivocal. Is unequivocal. So thank you so much for joining. I don't think I've talked quite so much for quite a while actually, so my voice has held out, so that's good. Namaste. Thank you for joining. Please feel free to watch or share this if you feel it's been of some value to you. I'm not here to teach you anything or share you anything that you don't actually already know inside, although it appears when one is sharing something like that that you might be teaching something. Actually, nothing was ever taught about ultimate truth. It was only ever realized, and as the realization flowers, the wisdom that of the universe will manifest itself in you, through you, as you. And it won't be personal. This isn't personal wisdom. This is collective awareness that's being conveyed here. It just happens a series of messages have come in the form that we know as Philip, that for whatever reason have been shared tonight, and perhaps in service of, in support of our collective reality, our collective consciousness, that we are all that. So if that has served you in some way in your form right now, I'm very grateful for you listening, and thank you for sharing. I'm back live again tomorrow night for my normal scheduled live stream, and this time it will be on the Peace and Love page, not just my personal page, but it will be being streamed to this page also. But on that one, I stream from the Peace and Love page to several pages at once. I just felt called to do this one on my page tonight, for those who felt called to come. So maybe a smaller audience than normal, but that's fine. It's for those that are ready to hear. So thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being open to your truth. I think there's one person I haven't said hello to, and that's Elaine. So thank you for joining, Elaine. I haven't seen you for a while. Glad you managed to get back from Portugal. So yeah, that's it. We're pretty much done. If anybody wants to ask anything after the stream or share the stream, feel free to do so. And I'll leave you with the harp track. It's called Seeking by my friend Tara Cook, recorded by her husband Ken. And you're welcome, Vanessa, as well. So thank you to everybody who said thank you. And I'll leave you with this harp. And I'll leave it on for a couple of minutes and then I'll close the stream. Namaste. I see you.